What is going on in the world right now? Well, I think for a lot of folks who experienced the pandemic of HIV and AIDS, we're seeing so many similarities in what's happening with COVID. And all the kind of misunderstandings and the characterizations, and also the way the government is responded. I think in some ways it was harder with HIV and AIDS because we didn't know what was happening, and it took us a long time to figure that out. And when we were first discovering it in the community, it was a death sentence. It was a definite death sentence. You did not live through this, and it was a horrible death. So first of all, there was no treatment, right? And so it was often you were getting sick, you couldn't work, so you got fired. You would lose your home. I mean, I can tell you story after story about what people went through. I had a guy that helped me around the house and did chores and did this and that, and he had a little Toyota pickup truck, and I remember he was a car wreck on Van Noen and Van Nuys, and he was thrown out into the middle of the street, and the emergency folks ran up to him and were about to get him, and they asked him if he was on any meds, and he said, well, I have AIDS. And they left him in the street. There was a friend of mine named John. I'll leave his last name out because his family deserted him, and he was a pianist. He was so good, and he lost his job, and then he lost his apartment, and he lost a lot of his friends, and he lost his family except for his sister. And he rented a small place on Westbourne in West Hollywood. And I remember I'd go to his house maybe 2 or 3 times a week and check on him because he kept getting sicker and sicker, you know, night sweats and laying in his bed. And I'd taken a course in massage it. Project Hingefoot. I'd go over, I would clean his bed and take care of him. Sometimes his sister would be there, and I remember the day he had to sell his piano. And then his mind, it went to his mind, and he started losing his mind. And so we finally had to move him into a facility out in Santa Monica. And I remember he would call me and say, Stephen, you got to come pick me up. I'm tired, you got to come get me. But there's no place for him to go, and he was unmanageable. And then, you know, a couple of months later, he died. So one morning I got to the office very early because we'd had problems with graffiti on the building. You know, we hate gays, you deserve to die, eat, you know, faggots, etc. And so we'd put a Teflon paint on the building, and our windows had been getting shot out at night. So we put in bulletproof glass around the building. This was on Romaine. And so I had come to work early because I was concerned to make sure we had hired a company to do power washing every morning, like between 5 and 7 or something. And I wanted to make sure the building was clean. I don't want clients walking into the building with faggot die written over the door. And so I got to the doorway, and there was a young man laying in the door. He turned out to be about 16 years old. He looked like he had decent clothes, but they were kind of dirty and torn, but not like worn. And I woke him up and said, you got to get off. A lot of street kids in that area right off Santa Monica Boulevard. And he said, well, I don't know where to go. And I said, well, so what are you doing here? And he ended up, shorten the story, he ended up telling me the story about how he had come home. He lived on a farm outside of Lincoln, Nebraska. And he had come home from school, high school, he's 16, and he told his mother he was gay. And she told him to do not tell your father and go to your room. And he was upstairs. His father came home. His mother and father had a huge fight. His father came up to the room and said, you're not gay, you're not my son, and beat him and beat him and beat him and threw him out of the second floor window where he passed out. He woke up the next morning and he went to the farmers next door, and they gave him $100, and he hitchhiked into Lincoln, and he took a bus from Lincoln, Nebraska to downtown Los Angeles. And then he walked from downtown, he got in like 1 o'clock in the morning, and he walked from downtown Los Angeles to Romaine and laid on the doormat of the front door because he didn't know anybody gay. But he had read in People magazine about our events and knew there got to be gay people there, and all he had to do was get to the front door. Luckily, we have a center in LA. I put him in my car. I drove him over to the center. They had a temporary housing for kids, teenagers. And so I left him there, and they took care of him. After my work specifically for APLA and went on with my career, one of the things it left me with was I don't have fear. What can you do to me? What can you do? Say something ugly? No big deal. Take money away from me? Nah. Kill me? Yes, you could kill me. But it left me with no fear.